There we go. That should be more to my liking. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure all the platforms know we're live, of course. There we go. Okay, we should be just about ready to start. Put a poll up so that way maybe we can get some more people in here, some more casuals. They'll vote in my poll. Okay. Let's do a little test. Let's make sure you all can hear Tyler's video. Make sure I can hear it as well.
Rising, powered by Mid 45. And to start out, I got to say, what an incredible show.
I'm going to turn Tyler's video down just a little bit. Just a little. Okay. Actually, maybe a little more. Okay. Chat, open, everything is set. All right, so let's begin. Of course, let me give an intro. Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. And in today's stream, we're going to react to Tyler Mannion's New York Pro Open Bodybuilding recap. Not just part one, part two as well. He split it up into two parts, so it's a long one. It is a long one. There's a lot to talk about. It is supposed to be the third biggest show of the year, but you had the Arnold UK and you had some good shows in there. I still think it was better than the Arnold Brazil. I definitely think it was better than the Arnold Brazil. But yeah, I'd say fourth biggest show this year so far, but historically it's been the third biggest show. and it was a good one. We had Nick Walker ultimately coming in and taking the title, and it was his show to lose, but he did end up winning. A lot more narrow than people would expect. 2 points, which is as narrow as it could have been given the amount of judges there were. A perfect score was 3, and he got 3 at both rounds, so a perfect score would be 6. Nick got 8, and then Martin got 10, who was in second. So yeah, as close as it could have been. Okay, I think we should just go ahead and start the video. We do have 2 parts to get into, so let's see here.
Hi, everyone. Tyler Manning here, NPC and IFBB Pro League Vice President.
Tyler.
And today we're going to be doing the New York Pro recap of the Open Men's Bodybuilding. And this is presented by Uprising, powered by Mid45. And to start out, I got to say, what an incredible show. I think the quality of guys that showed up here was really, really good. Even into the second call out. Really, the lineup of 5th through 10th place could be another show's first call out. That's how good I think the lineup here was. You know, a lot of the European bodybuilders that came over, I thought brought great packages as well. I'm not going to break them down, but, you know, I just want to say I think they look great. I hope this is a sign for the years that's going on that we're going to see a lot of competitive shows and competitive lineups. I really think that we are.
I think so as well.
So very excited about this one. The top 4 all looked amazing, I thought. Really, obviously, the headliner was Nick and Martin. I think Martin transformed from Detroit. I obviously judged him in Detroit. I thought he still looked pretty good there. I was impressed with the improvements that he made physique-wise, just seeing him in Detroit. But he came in here with, I think, what you would call a perfect bodybuilding peak. This guy's conditioning, separation,
I didn't realize
was next level.
I didn't realize how much more, I guess, separated. I don't know if more conditioned is the right word, but like he said, like Tyler said, it's just an overall better peak. You get a little bit fuller, get slightly sharper, and overall, the percentages that you change are maybe 1 or 2, but that makes a big difference. And also, Detroit has the advantage of having the black backdrop and the much better lighting than New York, although New York was okay. The live stream made it look worse than it was, but it was okay. But yeah, even with all these advantages for Detroit, I can clearly see that New York was better. I didn't know it was that much better, but it's pretty clear to me.
Level. Basically, almost his hamstrings were cross-striated. That's how deep the cuts were on him and the detail that he brought out in his physique, which made him look way denser than he did in Detroit. Completely transformed his look. Then we have Nick.
I'm Gwen Jorgensen.
Oh no, an ad. Please leave a super chat for so we can afford YouTube Premium. I'm never buying YouTube Premium.
Brought a good package here, but this was definitely not the best Nick Walker we've seen.
Oh,
and I think it's important to
let me go back and let me get the full quote. Hot take, not really hot take. I think most people have decided that now, but let's go back.
Then we have Nick. I think Nick brought a good package here, but this was definitely not the best Nick Walker we've seen. And
certainly the biggest. He is most certainly it's all the body parts were improved. The chest got a little bit bigger. The back, although it wasn't as dry as it used to be, I think it's just, you know, like a one-time pee thing. I don't think he's having like any issues with like a watery back. That just doesn't, it's just not a thing. Everything, even the legs got bigger. It's just the problem is when you stick it all together and put the waist in the middle. I would imagine that's what Tyler's going to say. Bigger doesn't equal better, and everything was improved in my opinion. Even some of the poses, the way he would hit the poses, like the real lat spread, it's just all together when you have such a mark on your physique as Nick's waist, that it drags you down overall. So yeah, let's see what he says.
I think it's important to highlight that really this is a show that it's worth making the drive to, making the trip to go see in person, because looking at, you know, these GoCo videos, looking at, you know, iPhone pictures taken of the stage with the backlights that help enhance everything on the iPhones, even professional stage pictures. Some people
come on
photograph.
Some people would like to defend Nick, but like and I know it's the posing routine, but anytime until the show is actually called, you're being judged. And like this, that's an issue, but I'm spending too much time
Some
on that. We'll get
people
to that, I assume.
photograph and video, and it makes them seem more conditioned than they actually are. I mean, this happened in many of the divisions throughout the show. So this is a show that it really helps being at the show and seeing it live, and obviously how exciting it was. You can't beat it. So hopefully it kind of encourages more people to attend the shows at the very least. But yeah, I think Nick's conditioning was good. It wasn't definitely what we're used to seeing from him conditioning wise, but it was enough that got the job done.
Yeah.
And now we'll go into it
Tyler's mic?
pose by
It is.
pose, and I'll break it down for you guys.
Scratchy.
So between Nick and Martin, I think many of these poses were extremely close. Really,
Yes.
in person, there was no blowout either way on any pose. Even with Nick having, you know,
Cake stand? You know who you are. I just get a strong. We really wanted to reward Martin because he's more aesthetic, but he wasn't quite enough energy, which is fair, I guess. That's exactly my opinion. Although I think I'd probably twist that a little bit, but I'll save it for the end.
you know, the additional size and more size to his physique and freakiness, Martin brought a level of detail and refinement through his conditioning that made
Nick
him
was still
hold
harder
his
and
own
grainier
at the very
overall.
least in every pose. And really looking through it, you can make arguments on.
Like, you can see here what I'm talking about. Martin is very dense for how young he is. But look at the legs. Martin is for sure winning the legs on the sweep. But see how much more, like, more dense they are on Nick's physique. They just have more depth to them. There is more happening there. And that's part of the reason Nick probably won, just the muscle maturity things. And Martin does have a lot of the density, but it's not quite to the level of Nick.
On almost every pose between these guys, especially being up right up on them on the stage. So first up is the front double bicep. Again, this pose I think is a very close pose. So for Nick, you obviously have amazing arms, freaky arms.
Yes.
He still exhibits a taper, right, with flaring lats down into his waist.
Debatable.
And while his quads from the front aren't the biggest, they have good enough separation in detail, and I think actually he did improve his quad size from the front from the last time we saw him. However, with Nick here, I do think that his waist got wider. So
the truth comes
overall
out.
Flow of the pose for Nick, I think, is hurt by his waist being a little bit wider here. I think it kind of minimizes the improvements that he did make to his quads and his sweep from the front. Because when the waist is wider, that makes the legs not look as big and the sweep not look as big. So then we go ahead and look at Martin. Martin exhibits a really, really good taper.
But less muscular overall, less filled in the upper body.
You know, I wouldn't say his arms are weak because I'd say they're about average in size.
Yeah,
but his inner arm detail here is definitely a weaker part of the pose for him. He doesn't have that same separation and detail that Nick has to his arms, obviously. Then we go down to the lower body. I think Martin has great quads. They have a very good shape to them, good separation, good sweep. From the front here and looking in person, that conditioning throughout the quads, while Nick has a little bit of that freak factor look, Martin's lines in the legs and size of the legs are very, very clean. So overall, with flow of the pose, you look at, you know, size, symmetry, fullness, conditioning. I personally think Martin took the front double bicep because of the...
I said that in my comparison. Well, not my comparison. It was my top 2 analysis video. And I figured I would be in the minority on that. And I definitely figured that most people would agree with me. And I think... I don't know. I think most people would. And I get it. It's just that Nick's waist is just too much for me. And I said in my video, a lot of these shots, just about every one of the front shots, Nick is like beating Martin body part for body part, just about everywhere. Except the legs, consistently. But it's just how much you can get over Nick's waist. And I guess Tyler didn't. And even though like Martin is like clearly smaller, through the upper body at least, there's just less going on there. Worse lats, worse arms for sure. Even Martin's abs, like Nick's abs themselves are okay. They're just being pushed out by that big gut. You know, I think everything in the upper body goes to Nick, except the waist. But now it's
overall
going to
flow
Martin
to the pose. His
just
taper is
on the
awesome.
waist
His
alone.
lower body and upper body were very balanced. I think the main thing going forward to him is trying to get a little more of that inner arm detail that we see in the front double bicep.
Yeah, they just need to get bigger overall.
But because of this, when you look at the difference between the waistlines and the flow of the pose, while Nick takes overall muscularity here, I don't think he wins any other part of that. So start out, I give Martin the front double bicep just by a little bit, 1-0. Next up, we have the front lat spread. Now, again, I think this pose wasn't the closest pose out of all the poses, but it still wasn't a blowout. We all know that this is Nick's weakest pose.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he's gone a little bit better at hitting it, but he still needs to workshop this. And
it's the waist. Like, his lats actually did improve, and like the overall way he hits it is good. Like, if he had the 2023 Arnold Classic waist, this would be so much better. But Martin, he just sucks. Like, this could be a slam dunk for him easily. But he dropped the ball. He dropped the ball on this one. I gave it to Martin still because Nick's waist is such a big detractor for me. But both guys suck, quite frankly. And for Martin, it's very fixable things that you can fix backstage with whoever's with you. You know, hey, look at this pose for me. What can I do? Oh, well, you can open up a little bit more. You know, it's just very fixable things. Very fixable.
Find a way just to get the lats flaring out more to exhibit better taper. A lat spread, it's also harder to hide your actual waistline. We see this with other bodybuilders as well. So it's harder to hide your real waistline on the front lat spread. So that's probably why it's a little bit harder for him to hit. He just needs to show more width and get that waistline down. Those are the main improvements for that. Again, he does that, and you'll see the improvements that he made in his legs. Obviously, he looks good through the arms and the shoulders. He could use a little bit more thickness to his chest here as well, but I also think he could even display that just a little bit better if he can hit the pose a little bit better.
Yeah.
Now we go to Martin. Martin does show taper here. He has a smaller waistline. His outer arms, right? So we're looking at the outside now of his arms and shoulders, have way more detail and depth to them than he does through the inner arms when his arms are raised in the front double bicep.
Yeah.
So I think he displays good detail here. He also could use a little bit more thickness through the chest here, but Martin doesn't open up his lats even all the way on this pose. I think Martin could be hitting the front lat spread much better.
Imagine getting beat by Nick Walker in lat taper and width from the front. All because of posing. No excuse, really. It bugs me. The more and more I watch bodybuilding and watch it seriously, the more bad posing really irks me. Because, like, Martin doesn't have a job. This is his job. And, I mean, Nick, I don't know how you go into the show and you don't think, to my knowledge, he doesn't use a waist trainer, but like Rolly Winkler did, and it worked. You can't say that it didn't. It's one of the best waist transformations we've seen. But yeah, just things like they go into these shows and like they don't think of everything, I guess. Especially Martin with the posing. It just really bugs me the more I watch bodybuilding.
Better, a little bit more arch to his back. His chest will look a little bit fuller. His taper will look a little bit better. But overall, when you're comparing him right next to Nick, he does exhibit all the features much more that we look for in this pose. So I think this was pretty clearly a Martin pose. He's up 2-0. Next up is the side chest pose. Now, I think this is a pose that basically was almost a toss-up between these two. And here's why. I think
that's fair.
Nick's side chest pose is very strong. Nick has a great side leg.
For everywhere but the pecs.
He has huge quads and huge hamstrings from the side. A good balance, obviously, between the two. He has amazing arms and amazing shoulders. He is able to pose to bring out a little bit more of that chest thickness that I think he has added over the years. Before, he didn't really have much thickness to his chest. He's definitely improved that a lot. The one thing that Nick does is he uses his back shoulder and pushes over in the pose a lot. And he can get away with it by doing it a little bit because he really has huge shoulders, huge round shoulders. But when you do that, you're taking away that width across the top that you need to be displaying in this pose. Now, he was hitting it, I think, better at some points. And then at some points, he was really pushing the shoulder.
It's just he's compensating for not having the fullest and roundest pecs. But yeah, he's like overdoing it because at some points he would just turn way too much, slam the forearm into his pecs just way too much. And it ends up hurting him and making his overall chest look smaller than it already kind of was looking at least. So, but Martin fair and square beats him in the pecs.
Shoulder over. When he's really pushing the shoulder over, that hurt him because Martin hits this pose absolutely perfectly. His shoulders are level, they're square. He looks very wide across the top.
Can't hit a
You're
front
seeing
lat
that
spread,
chest
but he
pushed
can hit
over.
a
You're
side
seeing
chest.
density and striations through the chest. You're seeing thickness through the chest. Again, Martin's outer arm detail is not bad.
No.
He has good shoulders. He has good shoulder to arm ratio. His side leg is great. He has a good balance between his quads and his hamstrings. While from the side, I think leg size-wise, it is a little bit smaller than Nick's. It's not much. It's really not much.
Very
and
not,
Martin's
not
conditioning.
Not noticeable.
So in person, his lines and the separation in his legs and everything basically on his body here.
If you go muscle per muscle, Martin beats Nick's upper body. Even the arms look so good. Yeah, from here, from the side with his extra fullness, and the delt, tri, and the bi, Martin's arm and delt does actually beat Nick's. I would maybe, now that I'm looking at this footage, I would maybe give Nick the side leg just barely, but I can see it going either way. And the point is, Martin's close, and with the win on the chest, I gave this pose to Martin narrowly, in my comparison, and I don't think my opinion has really changed. I think Nick looks a little bit better using this footage, but Martin still wins. Not on the pecs alone, but he's getting close in all these areas, if not winning them, like the arm and the delt. And then he has the better namesake, that being the chest.
Was crazy.
But Nick looks like a tank.
So when you're looking and going back and forth, we pose these guys multiple times, right, at prejudging and at finals. We're watching every single time they pose. It went back, for me personally, it went back and forth. We posed them one time. I thought Nick hit the pose a little bit better. The overall muscularity was shining through, but then at other times he was forcing the back shoulder across too much, taking away some of that width up top. Then my eyes would go to Martin. I'd say, I think Martin's winning this pose. So I can see how judges would look at this pose, and this could be a toss-up pose. I mean, this was a one-point show, so the panel was split almost right down the middle, 3-2 on which bodybuilder they thought won. And I think this pose is a big reason part of it. I think if Nick's able to hit the pose a little bit better, and again, I think overall waist control we're also looking at in this pose. So you have to remember that. I think Nick did a good job, but not a great job of doing that. Again, on some of the poses as we're posing them through during prejudging and finals, it was getting lost just a little bit. But at the end of the day, Nick came back to the finals much improved, I thought, with separation and conditioning than he was in the morning. And at the end of the day, just the overall muscularity is really, really hard to beat. And Nick edges this pose out ever so slightly to make it 2-1. Okay. The next pose is
I get that argument. It's just like there are two main things I look for in this pose. Kind of. I would say the first one is not even actually the pecs. I think the pecs are equally as important as the overall muscularity from the side. And Nick obviously is like more filled, even though like when you go body part for body part, Martin wins a couple of areas, including the pecs. Nick just overall is the bigger guy. I think that's pretty clear, and that's what's been said already. So with that, Martin wins with an important area, that being the pecs. Gets close on a lot of these other body parts if he doesn't outright win them. I think he can win both the upper limb and the lower limb. Nick could also win the lower limb, and he's bigger overall. So I see it going 50-52, but I would still give the edge to Martin. I understand why he gives it to Nick, though. I do.
The back double bicep. And I think this was a pose that in person was much closer than it would look through the video or through the pictures. So especially at prejudging, I thought Nick was definitely the conditioning was not as good as it was at the finals.
Yeah,
the
he's
lines
been harder
weren't as deep,
before.
the separation wasn't as deep, and his back was definitely a little bit flat. So again, overall muscularity, you see Nick's shoulders and arms from the back.
Beat Martin's
I think
for
his
sure.
overall back has definitely also come up. It's a body part that's been improved over the last couple years.
Oh, for sure.
And then obviously he has big legs from the back, great hamstrings. You're seeing great leg width from the back.
Yep.
And the conditioning was good. Now with Martin, his arms and shoulders from the back are pretty good, but obviously they're not to the level of Nick's.
Yeah.
His back itself was displaying good depth to it, very good depth to it in separation to really make it pop on stage. However, next to Nick, you see he doesn't have that same width in this back double bicep pose. Then we go down to the lower body, and really Martin's lower body from the back was crazy. He Like I said, his hamstrings were basically cross-striated. The leg width he was displaying, the detail, the sharpness was out of this world. So lower body-wise, I actually think Martin was displaying a better lower body, especially when compared, with Nick. But in the upper body, Nick's
I would
arms and
disagree.
shoulders
If you take a look, I think my cursor's on. If you take a look at the adductors here, and just the overall thickness of the hamstrings, the thickness of the really the leg in general, from the inside to out, it's basically pretty close. This little bit in here, and I know it seems minute, and also like the thickness of the hamstring cords is what does it for me with Nick. Martin does have the better glutes and the cleaner striations though, so you can go there. I think this is close. I would give the lower body to Martin, and then we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but arms and delts definitely going to Nick. Martin's arms and delts, really the delts mainly, are just so watery, and there's no the buys just flatten out. Nick has those great peaks, more separation to his delts.
are definitely a good bit better than Martin's. And then the overall back itself, well, Nick's was definitely on the flat side in the morning, but overall, he just has a better shape, and he does have what looks to be just a little bit more muscle back there. So Nick's taper from the back is great, especially in this back double bicep pose. So I give this pose, but not by a lot, to Nick to make it 2-2. Next up is the back lat spread pose. So this was a pose that I thought was
Did you say
pretty
you gave this to Nick?
2-2. Next up is Nick's taper from the back is great, especially in this back double bicep
better
pose.
than Martin's.
So I give this pose, but not by a lot.
Martin's shoulders and traps are overpowering. I agree. Good traps matter in the rear double, but when you take those traps out, Nick's mid back, lats, and the rest of the upper back, it just beats Martin. He's more mature as well. Martin has good depth, and this is going to be a great. It's going to age like wine, guarantee it. But Nick right now has the slight leg up on the maturity, that graininess, and just overall a little more density. Martin has more pop, but yeah, Nick looks a little thicker, a little more rugged, if you will. And then I think the delts are a little overpowering for Martin here as well as the traps.
To Nick to make it 2-2.
Yeah.
Next up is the back lat spread pose. So this was a pose that I thought was pretty clearly for Nick. Nick has improved how he's hit this pose dramatically.
And Martin got worse.
over the last couple of years. I actually still think his lats can come out a little bit more. I think this pose, he still has a little bit more to give. But overall, again, you're seeing the width, and you're also seeing the thickness of his back when he's hitting this back lat spread. Again, he has crazy big legs from the back. Conditioning was good. The hamstrings are in. The hamstrings are there. The leg width is there. Overall, this has become, which was one of his weaker poses, into I think one of his stronger poses.
I agree. Just a little tweaking of the pose,
Martin was
really.
really rounding his spine too much on this, so you're seeing it flatten out his back a lot. Not only is it flattening out his back, but it's also taking away from how wide he's going to be able to look in this pose too. So while the lower body was in and the lower body was great, I think he was making a pretty sizable mistake with how he was hitting this back lat spread.
I think he could have won it, to be honest.
That's what made this a clear pose for Nick.
I wouldn't say clear.
Now
still.
we're up to 3-2 for Nick.
Okay, and then now, there's a second part, and that's where it ends. Oh, Old Spice. Let's see. Next ad, Zooks. Anyone familiar? Okay. Bank of America. Man, wouldn't it be funny if I got copyrighted for showing ads? I'm pretty sure that's a thing. But hold on, let me make sure. Okay, so currently we have 3 poses left. He has Martin winning 2. I have Martin winning 3. And then Nick wins 2 for me. 3 for Tyler. Could Martin's posing mistakes in the lat spreads cost him the show? I think they could have. Like if he came out and, I don't know, because a lot of people beat Nick in the front lat spread anyways, but I think if he came out and took that front lat spread clearly, which he could have done just based on posing, and the rear lat spread, even if he got close, or like I said, I think he could have won it. If he did those things, those are 2 things that Nick doesn't have. So, Nick doesn't have. Okay, but anyway.
It's a side tricep pose.
Side tricep.
So, again, this was a very close pose between the two. Nick's side.
I I don't think this is the most flattering angle for Nick. I think when they flipped, it was a little bit more clear. If there's one shot that Nick has stomach control in, it is this one. Like, and as you can see here, let me see if I can.
Tricep pose.
Okay, well, he stopped it there, but Martin has more distension than Nick, and Nick by far has the better abs. Nick beats everyone in the abs in this shot. Good obliques, they're coming in. He's keeping the entire thing flexed, and yeah, he's a thicker individual, and that waistline is a bit thicker too. But with the pecs being really rounded here, and the waist still being a bit smaller, he still has that streamlined look, and it's kind of like a half hourglass. I call it a half hourglass. Like if you cut an hourglass down the middle, vertical wise, the pecs come out a little bit, cinched into the waist, out with the side leg. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm looking for on the opposite too, rounding the back into the waist, back out. And body part for body part, side leg, take your pick. I have Nick here now. He looks a little bit bigger overall and has a little more of that grainy detail. Midsection, which is a big one in this pose, I have Nick easily. Tricep, it can kind of go either way. When Martin was logging his all the way out, he had a lot of feathering, so I gave it to him in my comparison. But Nick can win. Very thick horseshoe, and I think if we're just going to display them like this here, Nick clearly wins. In the delt, take your pick, and then actually in the pecs, even though Nick lost a side chest based on the pecs, I'd have him winning the pecs here. So I don't think this one is close at all. I think this is actually one of the only firm wins for Nick.
Is one of his stronger poses. I think he's able to control his waist very well in this pose. He has very good ab detail and separation here.
Yeah,
he has great arms and shoulders again, great biceps, great triceps. Go down into his side leg, which is very, very strong. His conditioning actually looks a little bit better here, I feel like, because of that separation and denseness to his abs.
Yeah.
And he's able to control his midsection and get those abs in enough where his waistline does not look too wide here in this pose. Actually what I think is a more freaky side tricep pose. Then we get to Martin. I feel like Martin's side tricep, he was hitting a lot the old school variation, which when you plant that leg, instead of hitting with the traditional side leg pose, you're giving up leg size and leg width on the side. He's given up, that hamstring drop, which against a guy like Nick with crazy side legs, you can't afford to do.
Tyler's talking about hitting it in like the old school Dorian Yates style, which he would do, where that far leg would come back and it just made his side leg disappear. I didn't like that. So that's a good trade-off, but as people are saying in the chat, Martin's tricep did look a lot better. The whole pose looked overall better in the pictures. They should have picked a different frame here.
So leans a little bit too much forward. I think it's a flexibility issue with trying to make sure he can get those hands locked in the back to extend the triceps. But if he's able to stand up straighter, so he's not getting that roundness over, and then you're seeing like his stomach is not as flat as it should be in this pose, he can make this pose a much, much stronger pose, because with Martin's physique, he, again, like I said, his outer arms and shoulders really have nice depth and detail to them. So this could become a big strength for him, but against Nick in this matchup, I thought this was
Nick is just on another level. Martin will, even at Detroit, when he was a bit looser, more correct, I guess you can say, with the posing, even in Detroit, I was like, wow, already one of the better side triceps in the IFBB. And I think if he just improves the posing a little bit, he won't be on Nick's level quite yet. But even this, with what he's working with now, if he tweaked his pose, he would be up there with the best of them in this pose for sure. He has the thickness, he has the roundness, he has the tricep, good side leg. He just needs a little tweaking here.
So Nick takes it to make this 4-2 right now. Next up is the ab and thigh pose.
I'm interested to hear this one.
Martin's ab and thigh, I think, is very strong. Martin doesn't have the biggest abs, but his detail and separation in his midsection was very good at this show. Anytime he was even relaxed in his posing, he would just go back down to having a normal flat stomach, and you saw the detail and separation through the abs in the midsection. Yeah. Of course, it helps that his waist is smaller. That makes the illusion and everything look better. When he does this head to toe, we're seeing great detail. I think we see a very nice taper from his lats down to his waist. And in this pose where he's able to lock out his quad, he hits this, then locks out that quad, you really see how good his quads are.
Really, I wish you would actually flex it all the way, because the teardrop is feathered, But I hate when guys flex their legs and we don't have the vastus, what is it? Lateralis, the sweep, and the vastus, I think it's blanking on that one. Embarrassing. But the other heads of the quads. Maybe someone could tell me in the chat. Vastus medialis? I think that is the teardrop, so I think I'm wrong. The one in between these quad muscles. I prefer to have even the hip flexors and things like that up into the hip. I prefer to have them all separated and all flex at the very minimum. Like, it's just another slight posing thing that I think would take him a lot further than what it's worth. Few minutes of investment every day to pose a little better, a little posing practice. It would take him a long way.
The shape, you really see the striations, you really see the detail in them. I think this is a very clean and very strong pose for Martin. For Nick's ab and thigh is still a pretty good pose for him because he has those thick, blocky, separated abs.
But I can't pull up a picture now because I have my stream set to mirror this video. But if I pulled up the 2023 Arnold Classic, you would see how much. Well, no, I won't pull it up. I won't pull it up now. Maybe later. But he used to be able to crunch down all the way on those abs, all the way. Now, and when you know what that looks like, and then when you see it here, you can tell that he is full in the stomach. It's bigger. He's maybe actually physically full of food for the carb up. It's just he has better abs, but not being able to showcase that and crunch down on them is embarrassing, for lack of a better term. It's obvious. It's obvious. And the legs, the thicker waist doesn't help the legs. They're very thick. I may even have them over Martin's here for the detail. But it's a coin flip because Martin is so much wider with the sweeps. But yeah, Nick's quads, Nick's waist in this one was actually a stronger point for him when it was smaller. Because when he did crunch down on it, it was borderline okay. His quad sweeps were more present because his waist was smaller, and the abs obviously were a lot better. So even if he doesn't win on taper in the waist, he's beating most guys in the quads and in the actual abs themselves. But now he's screwing himself over with the wider waist for a kind of race to the bottom in the 2-for-1 deal because he's making his actual abs look poor and the quads look poor.
Now, again, we're seeing him right next to a guy like Martin. We see that the waistline was the issue here when you're looking between these two. So I think Nick has to just work on getting that waistline back in because he has that ab detail that he's able to hang with the guys that have the smaller waist and more taper in this pose when his waistline is in more, just because of that detail he has through the core. So this I thought was a clearer Martin pose, and that would make it 4-3. And last
4-3 for Martin. I went with Martin in this too, and I would still stay with him. And it's 4-3, so I think he had Nick winning the side try. I think so too. I think so. Did he? Hold on.
Nice depth and detail to them. So this could become a big strength for him, but against Nick in this matchup, I thought this was definitely more of a Nick pose. So Nick takes it to make this 4-2 right now.
Okay.
Last up, we have your favorite most muscular. So again, I think this in the side chest, this is another toss-up pose.
And that's crazy. The fact that, Martin's a big guy, very dense, he's packing on a lot of muscle. But Nick is still clearly in a tier above. Not in 2 tiers above, but just in that tier above. He's more muscular pound for pound than Martin. He probably has 20-ish pounds of Martin. Martin probably currently competes in the 240s. I think I've heard that. And then Nick, in his peak week, was 270. That's what Matt Jansen said in that apologetic post about the Pittsburgh Pro. He said, "Oh, it's a 270-pound bodybuilder. It'll be okay on stage." So there's a 20, 30-pound size difference between these. But I know what he's going to say because I did see Martin repost this part on his story.
I think some people would say, "Wow, that's crazy. What are you talking about?" Well, here's why. We're judging you on every single pose you're doing. Nick,
and he's
with
going
his
to talk about
hands
that one.
touching, doing his normal most muscular, standing straight up crab with his hands touching in front is a crazy pose for him. His chest thickness, this is where his chest looks the best. He has crazy, crazy arms and shoulders. You still see through the window here, you see the detail in his abs. Then I think his lower body, like I said, his quads have come up from the last couple of years.
They look okay when he hides
while
the
the waistline is kind of being hidden when he does the pose this way.
Nick should never hit that one.
Looking at the waistline, just your eyes aren't being drawn to there, so you see the improvements in the legs and the freakiness and everything else. So when Nick's hitting this pose, and if Martin, which he did at some points, mimicked this pose and copied the pose what Nick was doing, Nick takes it.
Yeah.
But these guys moved around a lot. And this is advice I have for a good amount of competitors. When you can hit certain variations and poses, when we're doing the comparisons, even if other guys are moving around and going to other poses, you need to stick to your strengths.
Yeah.
So Martin hit a kind of hand on hip, one hand on hip, half crab, exposing his midsection with the leg straight out, flexing the quad.
That's pretty good.
Honestly, a very good looking pose for him.
He should stop
he didn't
doing
really
that.
hit the hands touching straight up crab.
He should probably stop moving around so much. Like, you can do a little tilt to work the audience, tilt a little over here, tilt a little over there, especially if it's in your, your routines, whether it be individual or your actual posing routine. But for the love of God, stop moving, please. That is so annoying. Like, what are you moving around for? Just stay still. Another thing, it's just like, just stay still. Just stay still.
As much as Nick
a
did,
little
but
sway.
He did do it sometimes. He went to this pose a
Yo,
lot,
goat fitness.
which is a very clean looking pose. We're seeing even like the detail in the, lat to waist ratio of the midsection. His outer arms and shoulders have good detail and density to them. And then you're seeing the crazy conditioning and the shape and the muscularity in his quads. But hitting this pose next to Nick
Tyler's commentary sounds like Martin won, honestly. I think so. I think Tyler at the end of this video is going to reveal that he is one of two judges, because I think there were 5 total, and they take out the highs lows. I think he was going to reveal that he was one of the 2 judges that that placed Nick behind Martin. Martin loves to move around in the most muscular. That's true old school bodybuilding. They would never move around that much. They would. It's always okay to twist a little bit. But, like, more than I'm twisting now is way too much. The short little shimmy that he basically ends up doing, no, that's not it.
He's in that hands together straight up crab. He's just losing on muscularity. Nick just has that crazy size to him and density. So I would think Nick would still edge it out. But then, I remember this clearly, the last round at prejudging, Nick started moving around too. Then all of a sudden, Martin is hitting his crab most muscular, which is the only most muscular, in my opinion, he should hit. He looks awesome in this.
I used this picture in my analysis video, and I said in this particular pose, Martin wins, and it's closer, but I think that's convincing. That is convincing. Nick shouldn't hit this one. His chest flattens out. It doesn't look good. Not even his arms and delts look that impressive, to be honest. When he's hitting them not fully closed, they just don't look as impressive. And his his waist is also on display. He needs to twist more elegantly. Yeah, I would agree. It's just there's a difference between moving around a lot and basically going into a shimmy. But yeah, anyway, this variation, Martin wins. I don't want to say like hands down, but I would never consider Nick winning this pose. Let's keep it at that.
Pose. He dragged Nick into doing the crab most muscular at the end. There's a picture. Maybe I'll be able to even put it in here, even though I know we're doing the videos. Martin looks significantly better in this pose than Nick. Nick should never do a crab most muscular again.
Yeah.
I'm sure he won't. But
I don't know why he does
here
in the first
at the end of
place.
prejudging, he ends prejudging, and Martin hit the better most muscular.
Like that is certainly one of the most awkward things I've ever seen. Nick just doesn't have the. It's not that he's like narrow, but he is a narrower guy for sure. And you can just tell between like these different. It's like he's not even hitting it right. He's making his clavicles look even narrower than they are. And then the chest just looks soggy. The delts, they don't have that much separation either, and Martin would take that. The arms don't even look that impressive, although I still think he'd beat Martin, at least in that. What would be our right one? And then the traps, just weird. Yeah, and then the stomach. I mean, let's not even get started on the stomach. Let's not even get started on that. But yeah,
this is why I think the show was so close, because when you're moving around, you're getting judged each time you're posed. Like, okay, someone won this pose the first round, but it's super close. That's why we're posing everybody to see, is someone going to fade? Are you going to even hit different poses like this?
Yeah.
You can pose yourself in, or you can pose yourself out of not only placings, but just the comparison when you're going up for a certain placing against a person. So I think Nick's stuck with the straight up, standing up straight crabs, hands touching, most muscular. I think he did it enough where he still would edge Martin out through both posing rounds. But like people would think, this is a slam dunk pose. It's one of Nick's best poses. Getting out of that position, and whether he would put his hand on a hip or he would do the crab, that would give the edge to Martin and Martin's physique. So again, you can see how judges would change their minds on this pose. So really, at the end here, it scores 5 poses, 3 poses for Nick.
Yeah, I ended up giving, even though I was blown away by Martin's crab, I still gave it to Nick for the hands clasped version. I thought that was a very solid version. And he was just overall more muscular. So I thought that accounted for something. But if you told me Martin would win this, I wouldn't be upset one bit. I would still give this to Nick, and Tyler did too, but that's 50-50. I'm not upset with either of them winning. Isn't Martin like 27? I know he's young. His future is really bright. Yeah, he still has a couple years in his 20s, I believe. So yeah, and the muscle, like I said, it's just going to age better and better. Age like a fine wine. So yeah, Tyler had Martin winning. Okay. Tyler had Martin winning the front double. Martin winning the front double, front lat spread. Then he had Nick winning the side chest, rear double, rear lat spread, and the side tricep. And then Martin won the abs and thighs, and then Nick won the most muscular. And for me, it's kind of similar. I had Martin winning the front double, front lat spread, side chest. That's a flip from Tyler. And then I had Nick winning the rear double, rear lat spread, side tricep. Then I had Martin winning the abs and thighs. And then I had Nick winning the most muscular. So I think I have it 4-4. Tyler has it, let's see, that is 4-4, right? Yep, 4-4 for me. And then Tyler had it 3-5 for Nick. So yeah, I had it split right down the middle, 50-50. And a lot of those poses, like you can make an argument for Nick in the front double. You can make an argument for Martin in the most muscular. So I'm fine with the score being split like that, 50-50. It does come down to personal preference, to me at least. Can you get over Nick's waist and let the other aspects of his physique take over? And if not, and if shape is just the end all be all to you, then you're going to go with Martin. Hopefully he gives them overall feedback. I really want to hear him talk about Nick's waist more, but I think it's pretty clear. But he did mention it a couple times throughout these 2 parts already, but I'm glad. Most people are usually just like, he has to streamline more, and they'll use euphemisms, but it seems that Tyler's finally saying, you need to bring the waist down. It's an issue.
But the side chest and the most muscular are 2 toss-up poses that you can see really, really can go either way. That's what makes the show so great. That's what I think made it so exciting, is just overall, Martin, I think, showed that he is probably a very big contender to do damage at his first Olympia.
Yep.
He went up against a guy that's been top 5 the last 3 years, looked at as a top 3 bodybuilder in the world, unbelievable bodybuilder, and Martin pushed him to the limit. So it was Martin's best version. I'm excited to see what he does at the Olympia. Probably will rebound, gained a little bit of size for him. Even, a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of muscle on a rebound, and then he brings his conditioning again. It's going to make a big difference with how his physique is. Just his structure and his round, full muscle bellies. For Nick wasn't quite.
No way Tyler voted for Martin over Nick if he gave Nick 5 out of 8 poses. Yeah, it turns out maybe he still did, but yeah, I thought that was kind of going in a different direction, but Tyler did eventually end up giving Nick more poses. So yeah. Martin really reminds me of Phil Heath. I don't know if it's because of the bald head, but he reminds me so much of him. I think the overall roundness and completeness. I don't think they obviously don't look alike. One is black, and that's the end of that. But yeah, they obviously don't look alike, but they have similar attributes, like the fullness, the completeness. Phil wasn't missing anything, and Martin maybe a little in the arms. And then once he fills out, it's going to be good. Nick's waist is as wide as Jay Cutler's while being a bit shorter and narrower, so it's not a good look. Yeah, you can't have Jay Cutler's waist and not have the width through the lats or on the quads. Because Jay Cutler had that huge waist, he did, and he was definitely blocky, but he still had very good shoulder width and quad sweep, of course. Obviously, his legs, even though they were detailed and ripped, even compared to his waist, they were slightly narrow. Slightly narrow. Obviously, some of the best legs of all time, and I'm not saying that they're not. But compared to his waist, yeah, a little bit narrow. But overall, bigger than Nick's. Upper body wider than Nick's. Yeah, Nick is just dealing with an unfortunate set of circumstances.
Quite his best. I think he can push it to the Olympia where he focuses really on bringing in that waistline more. He's improved body parts. I think he keeps improving his chest. He keeps improving his back. He keeps improving his quads. He's only going to keep doing it. Bringing the waistline in, it's going to change that flow to his physique. And then I think if he nails his conditioning 100%, that brings out the true freakiness in his physique. So he's, of course, a contender in Mr. Olympia weekend. But I think it's exciting that another young guy is coming up. It just went toe-to-toe with a top guy, a true top guy. And I just think this Olympia is going to be incredible because I feel like all these guys are bringing it. I mean, I'll just say, you saw Samson and Hadi at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Now you see these two. We got plenty more guys that we haven't seen yet this year. And plus, we'll see Derek when he comes back to defend his title. I'm assuming all of them are going to make gains. This is the most exciting Olympia in a long, long time that I can remember. In third, we had Tonio, and in fourth, we had Stu.
So he's going to get into the second call out. Hopefully he talks about Christian Wolski. But I want to check on the poll. Check on the poll, you guys. Let's see. So, I mean, a fair bit, I guess there's not that many votes, but there are a few people out there that think Martin was robbed. Yeah, but let's get into that second call out.
Just real fast, since this is already a very long video, I'll just highlight what I think both of them need to improve on. So for Tonio, I think this was a very, very good Tonio. You see against guys like Nick and Martin, he still needs to add a little bit more width to his physique. I know he's a little bit of a smaller guy.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you can't just... I mean, add width to his physique, how? Like, like his delts are already very big. Maybe slightly suspect, depending on who you talk about. And his lats are already very wide. He's working with his genetics perfectly, like that. Like he's maxed out. Like Tonio, unfortunately, he's just not going to get wider. He can get a bit thicker, get it just a bit bigger overall, but he's just not like against someone like Beef Stew. From these front poses and things, like I'd have Beef Stew taking the first couple of them because he's just so much wider and more impressive. So.
When he raises his arms, in the front double, you see even from the back, his back is amazing when it comes to the back double and back lat spread, but he doesn't have that width that both of those guys have.
Yep.
Even standing next to Stu, he doesn't have the same width, even in the back lat spread. Now, I still think Tonio wins the back lat spread against Stu, but you see when it comes to width alone, he just doesn't have that same width that these, kind of bigger guys have. So he can work on adding a little bit more width.
Beef Stew needs to bring
I think
up
he can
back
still
for
add
sure.
a little bit more fullness and thickness to his chest. And I think something he really needs to work on is adding more to his hamstrings.
Yeah, I'll give you something he needs to work on more than anything. Tonio needs to work on shoulder mobility. Let's just go back and watch him hit these poses. It makes me... Like, I feel for him. I really do. Like, it makes me hurt. You can tell that he is just having trouble throwing his arm back and getting in, like, a front double, for example. He's having and he's talked about this. He's talked about how he's had a shoulder injury before and he can't hit certain poses. But yeah, like even the front lat spread, it's good. It is a great front lat spread, but he can maybe even rotate a little bit more. And you can just see some of the poses are a bit clunky. It just looks like he is stopped by whatever's going on with the shoulders. So hopefully he gets that a little rehabbed, because I think in some poses it hurts him more than others. The side tricep especially. I think he would do a little bit better with shoulder mobility. Yeah. But I'll turn the...
his chest, and I think something he really needs to work on is adding more to his hamstrings. You really see this on the side and the back poses when you look at the leg size of him compared to Martin and Nick. So he needs to really highlight those areas. I think
Tonio's good. He shouldn't be like a narrower guy, a smaller guy should not be collapsing this much, right? He should pull the shoulder back, stand a little bit more upright, because he has the full pecs to do it, and he needs all that width in that upright position. But he's talked about this. I think Muscle Discord asked him, and he said he just had a shoulder injury, and he can't rotate that well. And again, I say injury, because I don't think... I mean, it could have been, but...
I think his conditioning was very good. I think he's been a little bit sharper, before, but this conditioning was nothing to sneeze at. He was still very conditioned. Yeah. He had great lines and detail and separation. Obviously, he has a great midsection as well. That's what makes his front poses so strong and stick out so much, is that with the small waist, he has great detail throughout his core. So, the front double, even though he's not the widest, it still is a very strong pose. The front lat spread, I really like his front lat spread. You see a little bit more width in this pose than you see in the front double. And, of course, his ab and thigh is very strong, too. Most muscular, he could, be adding a little bit more size. Yeah. And that's what will take him to be able to compare closer to the two guys that were ahead of him. With Stu, I think it was actually very close between Stu and Tonio for third and fourth. With Stu, he could use just a little bit more size to his legs, especially for his quad sweep.
Even
next,
back to front,
he
like
needs
adductors
definitely more density to his back. I think that's his number one thing that he needs to work on. It definitely improved a lot just from last year. Tonio and Stu were first and second at this show last year, so we kind of got to see them battle it out again here.
Big step up in the competition.
Stu's overall size, he definitely got bigger. I think he still exhibits great lines. He has a nice small waist. Specifically, his ab and thigh is awesome. You see he gets ready to get in that pose, and then when he blows out all the air on his abs, you see his waist become so tiny with nice abs as well. The taper's crazy. So for him, really improving that overall back and the density to his back, adding a little bit more sweep
I would
to
have
his
had him
quads,
in fifth against Christian.
Doing that is going to basically increase his leg width, not only from the front, but also in the back poses as well. And I think he has a very, very strong side poses. So just getting a little bit more detail etched in to some of the front poses will help him a lot. Really, Tonio took, a couple more poses than him. I'm not going to go pose by pose because we just don't have time for that on this video. But
I thought Tonio took a couple more poses
from him. But again, depending on peak and show week, these are two guys that are obviously pretty close. A show like that could go either way. So hopefully we're going to see not only them, but a couple of the other guys that were in that 5 through 10 range at this show continue on to, California or Toronto. And we're going to get some great battles with, of course, some new guys, of course, that didn't compete yet coming in. So I'm really excited for the rest of this season.
Okay, we'll stop it there. I'll play back some footage. Christian could have beaten both of these guys and I would have complained. No, in fact, I want to say he kind of did. Like, if you go back and take a look at the live stream, which I don't believe I can show, at least not in its length, and I'd have to go through 2 hours anyways to find it. Christian's back was actually looking much better than Tonio's, which I can't believe I'm saying. It could have been the lighting on the live stream, but Christian's back is actually supremely thick. And his lat spread was also really good too. I thought his back was overall better than Tonio's, much better than Beef Stew's, of course. And then, of course, the front poses were so good as well because Christian has that big structure and he has everything. Good quads on the bottom, great quads, better quads than both of the other guys. Even against Tonio, he was just missing. I think Christian's missing a little bit of that thickness in the pecs. It flattened out in the front lat spread, and in the side chest and the side tri, it also flattened out. Even against someone like Tonio, who has that roundness. Yeah. All right. I think that goes over everything. So Nick is qualified for the Olympia now. Now the question is, because we're kind of like no, I guess it's not fair to say. I won't say that. But Nick is going to be like one of those last guys overall to qualify that's like a shoe-in for top 6. We'll have Hunter. We'll have Andrew. But other guys like that, they're done qualifying. Brandon, if he wants to come back, and Brandon, it's iffy. I think he hasn't improved. He's kind of been getting worse and been getting smaller. Last year obviously wasn't a very good showing for things out of his control, but he's probably going to get phased out anyway, starting soon. Big Rami, that's up in the air. And even then, like, he placed 5th last time he was on the Olympia stage. So, and he almost got beat by Sean Clarita in 2023 on a classic. So, whether that was because of Pittsburgh or whatever, like, I don't think he's going to be that much of a factor. Like, he would have to, like, the stem cells and the treatments would have to improve a lot. And then, yeah, so that really only leaves, like, Derek's qualified, obviously. Hottie is. Samson is. Nick is now. I think Martin, not a shoe-in for top 6, but he'll be pushing for it for sure. That's my not so hot take anymore. I think now people are finally warmed up to the idea that Martin is a top 8, maybe even top 6 guy. And then, yeah, that's it. So where does Nick place, I guess, becomes the question. Placed 3rd last year, and only beating Martin by 2 points overall. 1 point at finals and 1 point at prejudging. Doesn't mean Nick is going to be smacked down that hard at the Olympia to Martin's level. It's more like Martin is fast approaching Nick's level, if that makes sense. So, although I don't think Nick is going to be top 3 this year. As of right now, I don't think so. And this is like from a Samson Dauda hater. No, not really. I just think I just wish he would bring the condition, but I think this, like, it being so close was a wake-up call, not just for Nick, but, like, a lot of us. Like, the waist is starting to matter a lot more. The shapes and aesthetics are mattering a lot more. Samson already beat Nick once. I don't see Nick getting back into that top 3. 2 years ago, Nick placed 3rd. The field is different now. That's true. Maybe like a 4th, 5th. I think he will be within the top. I'm even struggling to say if I think he will be in the top 5. But like, what if Andrew's on? The fact that it was basically okay. Let's just say it was close because of Nick's waist. Like, overall body part for body part, Nick wins a lot more, right? And he wins at least 3 poses and 4, 5, maybe even 6, depending on who you are. So he's a better bodybuilder, but the waist is like derailing him hard. And I think, like, they were preparing him for that almost. It's like a warning, It's just kind of like, hey, do something about this, because you almost got beat by someone who hasn't even made their Olympia debut yet. Now, that guy is obviously very good. Martin is obviously very, very good. But for a guy like Nick Walker, who, like, a couple years ago, like, even at the 2023 Mr. Olympia, and we saw the update picks there from a week out, most people said he could have won the show. Now, I don't think so. I don't. Let me read some here. Nick is interesting. I feel he could place anywhere from 1st to 6th, honestly. If he somehow streamlines the midsection like in the 2023 Arnold, he can do amazing things. Certainly, if he has a Rolly Winkler type of transformation in the waist, he's back on my radar for a Mr. Olympia champion. But as it is, right, like, I don't know what's ahead. But as it is, where I'm standing from here, and we can kind of go 2 roads here, and I don't know what's in front of me on either one of them, I'm kind of leaning towards Nick not being an Olympia contender anymore. Like, he'll get passed by Martin soon enough. Unless, because even if Martin blows out his waist, is it going to be that bad as Nick's? Probably not. Probably not, because Martin just has the benefit of a better structure. But Martin's not going to blow out his waist because he doesn't need that much more size. You know, over his career, the next 10 years, if he gains, he would need to gain like 10 more pounds to be competitive at the top level. The very, very top. I don't see him gaining more than 20 pounds over a 10, 12-year career. He can't. He doesn't have rolly structure. Actually, that's a good point. That is a good point. Because Nick's problem isn't just that the stomach was fuller. It is also that he's dealing with a longer torso. Like his torso is like the same length of his legs. Honestly, the torso may even be a bit longer, which is such. Even if Nick's waist was streamlined, it would still be a weirder thing to look at. And it's also going to be very hard because like his hips are wider. The musculature in his waist is wider to compensate for this build. Just the whole anatomy of him is is odd. It's odd. Nick in New York places 4th or 3rd. Yeah, I think that is fair. I would say 4th. The fact that Samson beat a better Nick Walker, a more streamlined Nick Walker, and yes, Samson was probably his best at the 2023 Arnold, at least maybe condition-wise. If Samson could bring like an Arnold UK this year, Nick's not going to beat him again. Even though I may disagree, I don't think Nick is going to beat Samson again. Simply because it already happened. I don't think I'm just talking out of my ass. I think it's already happened. That Nick was better. And I think Samson has improved slightly. He doesn't need to be peeled. Because the Samson that beat the better Nick at the Arnold Classic in 2023 wasn't peeled himself. So, by that definition, I'd have him in 4th. When Nick just stands there, his taper looks horrible. Yeah, and he also, like, his stomach control in the poses is okay. But, like, when he's just standing there, it's pretty bad. Like, that posing routine we saw in the first video, that was embarrassing. He does great for the cards he's been dealt, but his structure leaves a lot to be desired. Yeah. That's why I'm not a Nick Walker hater. That's why I've always liked Nick. I like seeing guys like Dorian Yates, Tom Platz, guys that have been dealt worse hands for genetics. I like seeing them, do well despite that. And I think Nick has done very well for himself. It all depends, and that's why it's an exciting Olympia. Nick making a comeback, Derek trying to defend, Hottie making a comeback, very exciting for sure. The thing about the Olympia is that most bodybuilders rarely show up at their best, and I think this will work in Nick Walker's favor. Yeah, Dorian Yates had pretty crazy genetics though. For some of his body parts, and people had better structures. Like Sean Ray had a better. Well, Sean Ray was shorter, and that's part of structure. But Sean Ray had a better structure. Kevin Levrone had better shape to his muscle bellies and probably a better structure. But all these guys that are dealt shitty hands for like genetic, for like actual muscle bellies and structure, they don't also have the genetics for poor muscle building, because that would you'd just be dead on arrival. All these guys can at least build muscle and get in good condition. So, all right, I think that's going to be it for today's video. Yeah, so hope you guys like this one. I know Tyler is putting out, like, this was just open, and it wasn't all of open, but it was just open. It was a 2-part. I think Tyler is putting out, I think he has put out Classic. I think he has also done 212, and I'm interested in doing at least 212. Classic was kind of It was the same result that we had at Pittsburgh, just flipped. And I don't really want to. It's just going to be Tyler saying, we look at who's better on the day. It doesn't matter if one guy needs qualified or not. It does. It does. I guarantee it does. So maybe not classic, but 212 I'm definitely interested in. I was just as excited for 212 watching it as the Open. I thought 212 was very competitive. Very competitive down from first. Because I thought Ole did pretty well then. I thought it was pretty clear. But I was very excited. So if you guys want to see that, let me know. Yeah, but other than that, make sure you guys like the stream on your way out the door. Make sure you subscribe for more. And that's going to do it for me. With that said, I'm going to thank you guys for watching. And I will see you all in the next video. Probably video, not stream. I will see you all in the next video.